A new look to Pauly's podcast presented by the Fortis Academy and FortisAcademy.com. I'm Pete Wagner along with Ken Pauly. We're on YouTube. We're going to the masses instead of working. I probably didn't play some music I should have. I think I got spanked. How do you like that?
Well, you know what? Just when you think you're just a minnow, the whales swallow minnows. So we got swallowed.
Here's what happened. Spotify buys Anchor that I used, and suddenly I'm playing some Rush music to commemorate the great late Neil Peart, and then they're now relevant, and it's like, oh, no, can't use that one. And they never ever did that before.
And the problem is you had Kelly Cheeseman on last time, the LA Kings, and you had more people listening, and then you got in trouble.
I know. Well, then it spiked. It was incredible. Kelly Cheeseman spikes, the former Red Knight. So, we got a lot to talk about. It's crunch time. We're in the final week. We got a week and 2 days left in the regular season. The Metro West Conference title is on the line. Chaska now leads the way with a 6-2-0 record. You are right behind them. If you defeat St. Louis Park next week on Thursday, you win the conference title. And you've got some good teams there between yourselves, Chaska, St. Louis Park. Jefferson is in at 3-3 as well. So it's been a heck of a race.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like we talked a few weeks ago, a few years back, it wasn't as big a deal, but the conference has gotten a lot more competitive with Chaska on the ascent, and St. Louis Park is certainly is more than relevant, and Jefferson can beat you. So you know what? It's nice when you have a nice competitive conference, and winning it would mean something. Yes.
Let's be honest. Optics are optics, but when you look at your record right now as we record this on Friday, the 7th of February, you're 14-6-0. If you do run the table, sorry, that wasn't you. You're 14-6-2.
Yep.
That two looked like a zero to me. Looked like a zero. But you could finish with a 17-win campaign. 17-6-2 is pretty darn impressive. And when you think about the grinding and gnashing of teeth that were going on about a month and a half ago, this club's playing some pretty darn good hockey, and there are people taking note of the Red Knights right now.
Well, it's you're right. Whenever you can kind of come in with a 16, 17, 18 win season, playing, I think, a pretty difficult schedule. I mean, all coaches like to talk about how difficult their schedule is, but certainly we don't duck anybody, and we play a lot of good teams. That's a good mark. It's not. We actually thought he'd be better than that, but I think the kids have really rebounded here, in the recent weeks, and getting healthy has really helped too.
And then you got an injury again, right when you get full lineup.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we basically lost Charlie Bishop, and we think we might get Bish back. For the section playoffs, we'll see another shoulder, and we've had nothing but shoulder injuries. So, and it's too bad because Charlie was really starting to find the net. So,
do you think that's something to do with the game today, the gear? What's going on, or is it a tempered glass? What is it?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I hadn't really given that much thought, and as soon as you asked, I thought, I wonder if there's something to that. But we've had a lot of them, and I don't know if I have to talk to other coaches as well and see if they're seeing more of that. Even when Schweitzer hurt his shoulder, that was not a dirty hit by Chaska at all when we played him the first time. It was just he got hit, but not hard, and it popped on him. So it's a physical game. I don't know.
It certainly did pop on him.
Maybe they need more body fat.
Well, that would, you know what? Maybe they're too healthy.
Maybe too healthy.
These guys are like gazelles now these days.
They need our diet. We'd never get hurt.
What? Quarter pounders with cheese? No pickle?
No fries.
Add the fries. Do whatever you need to do there. So, you have some really big games coming up. We're going to get into the one that you have at Eden Prairie a little bit later. But one of the things I do want to ask you, in terms of the section seedings, and we're not going to get deep into that, but it's a philosophy and a theory. I ran it by Chris McGowan in the locker room before you and I hooked up, and I think it has some interesting value. So I run youth tournaments, and if you have a head-to-head matchup, it's thrown out. Okay, then you go into other things. In the situation of this, let's say Cretin-Durham Hall beat you, but you beat Blake, but they beat
Cretin beat us. Yes.
But then Cretin. But you beat Blake, and then Cretin, lost to Blake. Well, let's say whatever. So you've got those scenarios flying around out there. At some point, do you have to look at it and say, okay, look, that's a terrible loss. That's a brutal loss. You can't lose 6-1 to Stillwater, and a week ago lose to Eastridge. Do you start saying the head-to-head here? This year only, might not matter as much. I don't know. It's a question.
It really depends. It's not an exact science, and ultimately it's going to get down to who you think the best team is. And I've had plenty of times when I've gone into a seeding meeting, and I know one year we beat Minnetonka, and Tonka was seated ahead of us. And I know a few years back we beat Wayzata, had the identical record, and we beat Wayzata, and Wayzata was seated ahead of us. And so it is. I still think head-to-head's a gold standard, but when you have some head-to-heads that cancel each other out, then you have to go to something else. And I mean, and like you said, we can get lost in the weeds here. They still have to play. I actually think that Wayzata Edina game is a key game, because if Edina beats Wayzata, Edina will beat them 3 times. How in the world could you put Wayzata ahead of them when Edina's beat them 3 times? I don't think you can do it.
Well, and Edina's got some pretty nice wins too. They've got some more rough losses. I mean, you go. In the end, if I were to do this, and I'm kind of off the rails a little bit, the Benilde-St. Margaret's Red Knights, I'm not saying it because you're sitting here, is the best team in the section that has a record and a resume that's beginning to speak for itself, and you got to finish strong here coming up. I honestly feel as though the way they're playing, Edina would be right behind you. However, they have some losses in there from the earlier part of the season that might kind of ding them a little bit, but so does everybody else. So I'm glad I'm not don't have to figure this thing out.
It's not going to be easy, and I think ultimately it does get down to everyone's going to have their argument in terms of head-to-head, common opponents, strength of schedule, et cetera, and it's going to get right down to kind of, okay, well, who do you think's better? And it's one of those things where we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, that was the year when, believe me, when we didn't have a very good team, neither did Wayzata a few years back. We both had like 7 wins. And I think what it got right down to, but no one wanted to say, is even though we beat Wayzata, everyone want to say, yeah, you beat them, but we just think they're better, and so I think if I'm Kurt Joust and they're going, yeah, you know what, Ken, you beat them, but I'm going to be number 1 seed, and I don't want to play Wayzata again because I think they're better than you. Well, and so I think that's a fair argument. You just have to make it.
Eden Prairie, Prior Lake, same argument. Prior Lake beat Eden Prairie, but I think everyone thinks Eden Prairie's better. Eden Prairie's a good club. So, but you guys worked over St. Michael Albertville in a very chirpy physical game. I assume I understand what I hear from sources.
Well, it got a little rough, but it was. I'll tell you, it was. You know what? A lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. I mean, just a bunch of guys with face masks on pushing each other for a few minutes.
Tough guys.
And it was not a dirty game in the least. It got a little. And if there was a few exchanges early on, but it really wasn't that big a deal at all.
Okay, so the chirpiness wasn't that much. It's so fun though. It's the best part. Listen, these guys think they're so great.
Now they all talk.
They steal something they heard from somebody else or whatever. Okay, but Asher Connelly is playing some really good hockey for your team, and he is settled in on his line very well, and there's some guys that are complimenting him quite well, and that's obviously Marshall and Bassan, and you're seeing all their numbers really kind of explode here.
Well, when we talked earlier before we started this, Wags, I said, it's really nice to have lines together for 3 to 4 weeks, and it's the first time that we've had that, and so really like that Bassan, Marshall, and Connelly line, and Asher just got continue to get better. What we tend to forget is when Asher came in last year, we really had him projected as a top 6 forward, but he had a major injury problem with his hips, and so he was really held back. Had major surgery over the summer, and so even he was slow starting this year as well. And so you could just see it kept coming in practice, and it's another good lesson. It's like just keep working. We're not blind. And all of a sudden it's like, gee, we can't keep this kid out of the lineup. And now he's playing with 2 of our top forwards, and he's he's one of our top forwards. So it's we like that line. It's going to give them some time to, they're building some synergy. They make some mistakes with each other, but I think they're correcting those. And I think Asher's one of the reasons why our offensive attack is picked up.
He's playing with pace.
He really is, and he has a lot of. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's frustrated. I don't think he has a goal, but he's got 13 assists.
Take him.
Yeah,
a point's a point.
Yeah, and he didn't get a ton of shifts the first 8 or 9 games because he was hurt. He just was. I mean, he wasn't. He could play, but he just wasn't playing with the same pace he's playing with now.
Blake Messenberg's heating up.
Well, you know what? You look in last 5 games. He has 10 points.
2 points a game, baby.
Yeah, and it's Cooper Gay. He has 10 points. And so that's another line. Warner, we've settled in line there as well. So, last night against Chaska with a big win, 4-1, good big conference game. He just kind of tracked that puck, stripped that turnaround, just sniped it into a corner, and that's the Blake that we saw last year.
Confidence is a big deal for him too, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I think for all goal scorers, I don't think Blake's unique that way, and he's starting to find the net, and he's starting to feel it, and I would tell you, we won't go too far. We talked a lot before, but Cooper Gay has got some of the best hands for a big man. I mean, you should see some of the things he did the last couple of games. So it's been fun watching him too.
I was talking about him last night with a couple black coats, just so you know, at Braemar Arena.
Yeah.
And we were talking, and I'm going inside baseball a little bit here, but I brought him up. I said, "What's wrong with 6'4" and about 220 pounds of mitts and grit?" I think he's going to do just terrific here, but this is the type of player that in the playoffs things are so tight and they're so pressure-packed. And I want to talk about playoff atmosphere a little bit. And you said something about the Edina game at the very start of the year, that it's really great. You always try to achieve the playoff type of feel to a hockey game. You guys got it early on with them, but it's different, and the adrenaline's different, and you're shakier, and you're not, you get into it eventually, but everything seems to go so much faster.
It does, and every decision gets put under a microscope, and it's like, oh, did the guy get that puck deep, or is he on his backhand here? And it's like when you watch, I both are baseball fans, and when you watch playoff baseball, it's the same thing. Every pitch, every pitch.
There. You can't miss
and that's the same thing. And so when you have, when you can kind of duplicate that atmosphere. It's really special, and I think we had that with Edina very, very early on. And you do get a few games during the year, not a lot of them, but a few that have that feel. And so that was a lot of fun. That's why obviously we're looking forward to a few games we have coming up that we think will have that as well.
You've got a couple of really key ones. I think about Eden Prairie on Tuesday, and I when I put that down on my production schedule, I was like, this is a state final preview, and this is going to light up the lamp with people. And then things obviously changed a little bit, but now they're changing back to where this has all of the makings and markings to be just that game. And the truth doesn't lie, does it?
No, it doesn't. And, I know basically a few weeks ago when you interviewed both Lee Smith and I after our 500th career victories and all that good stuff, this topic came up, and I think that comes with being around. He has had a few struggles. We've had a few struggles, but we just really weren't. You're concerned, but you're not worried. I mean, if that makes sense, because it's going to settle. You'll settle in. You'll be fine, and so. That game that we thought would be a big game at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, people, whoa, what's wrong with both these teams? Like, no, it's a big game. It's back to where it was, and so we're looking forward to it, because that's we'll see where everyone's seated and all that other stuff, but. EP and Benilde-St. those are two of the top 5 teams in the state. I don't care what rankings say.
I turned around to your son during the Holy Angels game in the playoffs last year over on the East Rink. Yeah. The Stars scored early, and they're totally into it. Yeah. And I looked over my shoulder, and I wanted to see what he'd say. And I said, "Are you worried?" And he says to me, just stone cold, "Worried? Why would I be worried? Worrying isn't going to score goals. You just got to go do it." I looked over at him and I said, "Okay, your father's a coach. Love you. You're perfect, and you will be too someday."
Yeah.
So, but it's true. You can't worry when things aren't right. You just do.
Yeah, and that's like, listen. I mean, that's the hockey is a game of emotion, and you really have to have, but you have to learn how to harness that emotion as well, because it's like and I think that's true with a lot of sports, but hockey really, I think, is such an energy game. And so, but when you do start to get overly negatively, overly worried, you also screw yourself basically into the ground. And and I've made that mistake as a young coach, where you basically and that's the value of being around. You kind of get back to talking about section playoff hockey. It took me 3 years before I won a section playoff game, because when you're a young guy, it's tough. It's a different cat.
So that interview I did with you and Lee about the 500th win, we kind of talked about losses being harder than the wins to remember, and kind of going down that road. And you both talked about the section playoffs. I asked the question, which is bigger, the section championship or the state championship? And you said the section, because there's so much that goes into it. The other one, you get there and you kind of work your way to the final. The way you guys answered it, I can't wait for people to read this. Yeah. It's really impressive, and it's perspective that it's a different animal, though.
It really is, and I think that's the thing is, it's like I've often said, I came up, it's like, the only ones who feel bad, when they kind of lose in the state tournament is the guys who are in the state tournament. No one sitting and watching in the stands feel bad for them because they trade places with them.
Of course.
And so, to me, kind of once you get to that point, it's like, you know what? Enjoy the spotlight and let it rip and see what happens, that. And so, but the thing is there's a finality to this stuff where it mirrors life. And, right now you kind of look at those seniors and you start thinking, you're getting a little, oh gosh, this kid's gonna be gone. In a couple. Even if you make the run, in a month he's gonna be gone. It's gonna be done. And so I think the season, it gets exciting, but I think that's for parents too. I think it all gets very poignant at this point.
Yeah, and it's such a weird thing because you look at those kids and you go, wow, I've been pretty much attached at the hip here with you since freshman year, some way, somehow.
Yeah.
Sophomore for sure, for the longest season in high school sports. And let's be honest, there's nothing like a high school hockey locker room and what that brotherhood is like. It's real.
Well, they're formative years, and believe me, it doesn't necessarily define you for the rest of your life, but they're still formative experiences, and they can be things that are incredibly special. And for some people, it's maybe not as big a deal. Others, they'll never forget it. And I look back at my experiences. Why is it a football player, back in 1981, and it's like I'll never forget those moments. That was actually bigger for me than hockey was.
How could you ever?
You can't, and so I didn't peak at 17 years old. I think it's impossible for a second-rate power guard like me to ever have peaked.
Yeah.
But seriously, it's like, what? It's it's fun stuff, and it's these games, and that's where I think a lot of the electricity in high school sports and section playoffs comes from.
And you can feel it coming right now in all these games we're at. You can, the finality starts to come through. Are we ready? Fans aren't smart. Fans are very smart. They know what's going on. They see the game. And these games, so the Eden Prairie game late in the season, man, this is intense. Your approach to that game with the team that likes to run, what's your thought on them? Their transition game's pretty darn good.
It's really good. And, we played some pretty high-end forwards the last couple games. They certainly don't enjoy the same depth as Eden Prairie, but I've seen very few top lines better than that Leyland lined up with St. Michael. They transition quickly, and they pass. It's not so much that they're fast; they just pass so quickly, and they're so intuitive. Mm-hmm. And they just dump in the spots, and if you're not aware, they just catch you. Snuggerud's the Snuggerud Kids Special at Chaska, but EP's got like 6 guys like that.
That are special.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you what, we better tighten up. We're the ponies are running, but we got fortunate. Limestone stopped a couple breakaways. They could have scored 4 goals, and we can't be doing that on Tuesday. But that's a great game going to section playoffs because let's face it, whether you're playing Blake, you're playing Edina, playing YZ, you're going to see the same thing.
I think your team's really good when they play with a little bit of an edge too, though, a little bit of a chip, and when they're throwing it around a little bit.
Yeah, you know what, and that's believe me, like even starting the week and we talked about a little bit, but it is one of those things where we started highly ranked and dropped a few games and all of a sudden we fall off the radar, and it's like okay, it's like I think Blake's got a good team, but we beat Blake, and yet, they rise to being the second-ranked team in the state, and we drop 3. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's like, and then it's like, how does that work? So and listen, you can cry all you want. And I'm crying a little bit, but at the same time, you sit and some of the so-called prognosticators and the people who follow this stuff, and I'm not. That's not a swipe.
Hey man, I'm one of them.
But it's not a swipe at you because there's a few other people I feel like I like an awful lot. But it's kind of funny. Not one of them has mentioned the fact that all season long, we had 2 or 3 top guys out every single game. That's even before the St. Michael game. That's I told the kids for the St. Michael. I said, has anybody mentioned the fact that Not once the whole year have we had our entire team in place. Now, I know that every high school coach out there can say the same thing at some point. I know Kurt could say to Edina, they lost some games. Why? Jimmy Clark was out. Duh, right? Yeah. That's how that works. But has anyone else had everyone out for like 18 straight games? Because that's what we had. That's what we had. And so it does matter. And we have people, and that's the experience thing to understand that, you know what, if we can kind of get it together, in 2 weeks, the intensity picks up. And in a way we go. And we've talked before, like, listen, I don't care. I'm not going to look at Edina's 500 record or whatever and get seduced like, oh, yeah, they're not very good. Give me a break.
By the way, I've had this damn
You're
cough.
dying on me over here.
I've had it for like 2 months. I'm so bitter.
Yeah, I know. Well,
oh, man.
Yeah, you're just doing
Are we going to wrap this up?
We're going to wrap it up before you die.
I do have to finish with this, though. It's been brutal trying to rank teams this year.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, I don't even like it.
Yeah.
It's not fun. I enjoy it because it's always been fun because it's been pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
But if I got to sing, the cream will always rise.
Yeah.
And the Red Knights have risen back. And I think mine is the only one that has them in the top 10.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that true? Is that true?
No, you basically always have had us there.
Does
what?
Does the unofficial Let's Play Hockey have in the top 10?
Oh, now it does, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
they copy me.
Yeah, well, there you go. But you know, Wade, before you stroke out on me, I'm going to thank everyone for listening to Pauly's podcast with Pete Wagner, and we'll see you next week.